So this morning, we're going to be going over safety. All right? And what is safety? What is safety to you guys? A what? Job one, a priority. Also one of the 5
what?
core values. Who said core values?
Core values.
All right. So safety is a core value, right? One of the 5. Ask is. So we're going to kind of go through a little bit about that, and then we'll go through some HDOT personnel safety requirement information that we need you to be, informed of and just know by heart. This shouldn't be anything new to you, but if it is, please take in the information and make use of it. Then we'll get into the construction contractor requirements in regard to safety and our role in that part of their requirements. The very ending is about notifications, and this is going to be something that may seem new, but it's always been there for us. So we'll just kind of refine ourselves again to get a little tighter on how we do our safety. I mean, it's a core value, but what do you do with it, right? How do you make it happen?
Okay, so before we get totally started, I want to bring George up, the district engineer. Yay, George!
Yay!
Round of applause. You're fearless leader.
Thank you once again, everybody, for coming. And I just want to share a short story about safety. But before I start, how many of you have experienced a job site accident? So how many of you have seen a crane tip over on a job site? How many of you had your guy you're personally responsible for get hurt on your job site? How many of you have been to the hospital 3 or 4 times to visit those same people? Okay, so unfortunately that's me. All of that. I've gone through all of that. And luckily most of you have not. What happened with us is when I first started in construction, when I was on the job site, yes, I put on all my PPEs and everything. But when I moved to the state, for some reason, when I was in private, it was one thing. When I moved to the state, I did not think it was that big a deal because I wasn't in the same environment. I'd go to inspections or go to a scoping meeting or scoping inspection, and it was required to wear a vest and a helmet. I would just wear a baseball cap because I thought I was better than everybody else. And safety, I never got hurt in those things. It's not a big deal. One day, one of my supervisors was out on the road, saw Attire when I was at highways. When I first started at highways, he ran out into the road to get the tire and got hit by a car. He wasn't wearing any PPEs. We had no procedure to call for backup or anything like that. And he just did what he thought was right, and he got hit by a car. And unfortunately, he did not die from that. But he never came back to work, and he died prematurely. And so, and from then on, I understood the importance of safety. I had to go visit him in the hospital. I had to go look at myself in the mirror every day. These are the kinds of things that I don't want you folks to have to live with. Yeah, unfortunately for me, I've gone through several of these things, and unfortunately for me, even the first accident, where I had one of my guys hurt in construction, when I was in private construction, I thought he was dead. People were calling my name. I ran towards the crane. He was there next to the crane. There was blood all over his shirt. He wasn't moving. And I don't know if you've ever experienced the life drain out of your body, but it starts from here and it went all the way down through my body and went out my toes. This is the reason we're here today. Part of the reason, okay? So that you folks don't have to go through that. so that you folks don't have to look yourselves in the mirror, because I do every day and still relive some of that stuff. Especially when they're your people and you're responsible, it hits even more. When it's your friends right here, it's going to be even worse. The guilt is something, again, you just should not have to go through. So take it seriously, and thank you again for coming.
That is what we're talking about today. When Alan talked about safety and what it means to you, it's really about everybody going home the way they showed up today. And I think sometimes we become complacent, and that's that word that George was alluding to, where we don't think it's really a big deal. We're not the ones in the machinery or the operation. And I know that on one of our projects, and some of that staff is here, that there was a girder that tipped and things happened. Luckily, nothing happened, but it's those things that happen, and we need to do everything to make sure we prevent it, to make sure everybody goes home safely and the way they showed up that day.
So like we said before, safety is one of our core values, right? As we go through this continuous kind of improvement of understanding our mission and values and coming up with that vision, we'll clarify over time what vision means to each of us individually, and you guys as a group, right? Highway O, you're going to come up with your vision. So we're going to just go over some things that you need to keep in mind. So question number 6. Safety is a HDOT Highways Division core value, yes or no, or I don't know. I hope you all said yes. Right? Okay. I think George had a very good story, and I'll skip this part. And this is why we all want to make sure we pay attention, keep in mind all the safety requirements seriously, because this is why we want to go home, right? Everyone, and our team members. So, what requires us as HDOT personnel to pay attention to safety? Okay?
Anyone? Wait,
This
I
looks-
heard something.
Somebody said HIOSH right here. So yes, this is the law, actually. The Hawaii Occupational Safety and Health
So do you guys
Division.
know what HAR is?
Hawaii
So
Administrative.
HIOSH is the law, right? So this is the law.
So HAR 12-110, remember that. That's the guiding information on what everybody in construction in Hawaii has to pay attention to. There are some other HAR 12-60 is industry, but for us in construction, it's this 110, okay? And it has all the information, but it basically says, employees shall not knowingly perform work in an unsafe manner or in an unsafe environment. So if you recognize that you're in an unsafe environment, then what are you supposed to do? What was that? Report it. Okay.
Should you do it?
Should you do it?
Should you perform the work? in an
Should you be
unsafe
there?
manner? No. No.
Okay.
So the assessments, what was concerning is that people felt like they were performing work in an unsafe environment. Knowingly doing it because of complacency, I would say. So we're not going to do that anymore. Because it's the one time that you do it, that you think you're going in the middle of the road to get a tire to do a good thing, that something happens. And it's not worth that kind of environment, or it's not worth putting yourself in that kind of situation for you not to go home that day.
So just know that legally, you are required to not do that stuff, right? This is the law. So what do you do when you're in that kind of scenario? You're going to not do it? You're going to report
Not
it?
do it.
Yeah, so you're going to get some kind of notification into somebody, right? And figure out what you're going to do. This is for yourself personally, right? Your own life, your own safety. So you need to take responsibility for your own safety, okay? Is what this law is saying. So this is the PPE we're all pretty familiar with, right? Is there any part of this that we're not clear on? So that you notice this guy has gloves on, yeah? So we picked this picture because gloves have become kind of a norm these days of minimum PPE. I don't know if you're aware of it. No, seriously. So some companies, some construction companies have that as a minimum. And when you're on their job site, whose rules are you supposed to follow?
Contractor.
You're on the contractor's site. Okay, you're on the contractor's site and we make him responsible for his site, correct? So if you're on his site, are you following his rules? Yes. So if we need to get additional PPE, because gloves are kind of a newer thing in the last few years that I've noticed. I mean, we've all kind of evolved. First it was like make sure you have hard hat and boots. Then it was the vest. And now actually this vest is not the right one, right, for a roadway. We need the class 3 with the stripe on the sleeve. And then, you know, the hearing protection and all that other stuff, it's kind of as the situation arises, right? We take a look at what kind of noises we're exposed to. Eye protection became a minimum also, right? What else is the minimum? So boots, so the basic was the clothes, right? Short sleeve shirt, long pants, boots that are, and see that number down there, Z41.1, hard hat, eye protection, hearing as needed, but just be aware of this glove situation, yeah? So some of the big contractors have it as a minimum PPE, and we may be needing to use additional resources to get that. Because you can't be walking around on a contractor's job site and expect him to enforce his safety plan if you're not complying with his safety requirements. You're in his zone, his responsible area. Any questions? Yes?
Is this also going to be stocked in our warehouse, or how do we go about getting this?
So that's a good question for resource
So the
people.
question is, if they don't have it, how do they get the proper equipment to be on a job site? Safety systems? Do you have to ask the RE? I don't know what your process is. You go to the RE, go to your supervisor. Project foreman might have it. Nainoa's got everything. He's got a government card. He'll help you out. The contractor may have. So does that answer the question? I mean, for sure your supervisor, ask them, especially if, you know, the question over here was why the harness. It depends on what the job hazards are and what's required by the contractor or the person of that site. And if you need that, make sure to talk to your supervisor. The contractor may have extra. You may have to be qualified to use certain things, so make sure you have the appropriate qualifications. I think the big thing is be aware that it's not always following DOT's PPE, that you have to be cognizant of the site that you're on, and actually, for your personal safety, make sure you touch base. What are your safety requirements? I think we get complacent and we don't talk about those things. I know I've been on site several times and nobody has said, oh, you need to have your hard hat. I forgotten my hard hat and I walked out of my car and nobody says anything. So we all need to heighten our awareness. It's a core value. We want to go home the way we showed up. So it's important because you never know when that one thing's going to happen. And it's just like the documentation we're talking about and everything, just heightening our awareness. The one time that we don't write letters or we don't put our hard hat on is when something swings and hit us. So we're going to make sure we're doing all of this all the time.
Okay?
So do they do it in a pre-con to the contractor?
What was that?
Do they do it in a pre-con?
At the pre-con, but also keep in mind, on a job site, operations change. So what happens at the pre-con may not be the situation that's happening every day.
And we'll also take a look at the contractor's safety plan, okay? And it should be covered in there. So we'll get to that a little later on. All right? Any other questions about the PPE? Yeah, the harness is extra only as needed, right?
And Oahu, you guys have your own safety plan and procedures. So we'll talk about, touching base with Ruth. Again, I think the appropriate conduit always is to go to your supervisor, but you are responsible for your safety. And you should not be putting yourself in unsafe conditions. And that was one of the very concerning findings out of the assessment is that people were knowingly going to work and not feeling safe, running into the road without traffic control. And again, the assessment was statewide, so it may be Oahu, it may not be Oahu, but it's concerning that anybody would put themselves in that situation. Maybe your supervisor has been working for 30 years and they get a little complacent. That doesn't mean you should. It is never excusable.
So within HDOT, we have some zero tolerance items. So you need to be aware of these. And they are tied to the law. So the first one is use of intoxicants or drugs. So no person is permitted to work under the influence of intoxicants or drugs, and the result will be removal from the premises if found under the influence of intoxicants or drugs. So this is in your, the Highway O procedures, I think, and also the division safety procedures. So this was on the pretest, right? You saw some of this. So are there any questions about this? So through the assessments, we had some concerns, okay? And this is why we want to emphasize the zero tolerance stuff.
But
question?
Oh, that's what I was going to say. That's okay, right?
Or any drugs that you're prescribed by your doctor, right? That could have an influence. What should you do? What do you guys think?
Those are okay, right?
Are you good?
I don't know. You tell me.
Are you good if your doctor says you have to take that drug?
No, that's not good. What do you do? What?
Okay, so you're not allowed by law, right, to be operating or performing work on our sites. So what do? You can't work. What do you do when you can't work?
TDI.
Do you talk to your bosses? So that's the first step, right? If you're in a situation you cannot work, you know this legally, so you talk to your boss. And between you and your boss and your team, you're going to have to figure out a way to get past this point where you have to be on that drug and figure out some means of doing whatever work you can do legally. So this is kind of a new thing it's not actually really new, but it's a new awareness that we need to take account for any kind of mind-altering drugs you might be on. So, is it okay if you just don't drive a vehicle? And maybe somebody drops you off at the job site, is that okay? Yes? What do you guys think? Is it okay?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so, because aren't construction sites pretty hazardous? Things are moving, right? So you're never going to know where things are, and if your mind isn't sharp, you're going to be putting yourself in danger. Okay?
And others.
And others, yeah. So especially not driving, right? Because then now you're in a weapon. And then especially on a job site in construction, there's so many hazards, and you could cause some hazard, like maybe somebody tries to avoid you and then they hit something else, okay? So again, please take this very seriously because it is a zero tolerance item for the state. So what do you do if you see someone that you feel is intoxicated on the job, or somehow you know that there's some kind of prescription they might be on? What do you do? One of your fellow co-workers. Well, this is a harder one. Report it to the supervisor, yeah. Communication on their medication. What do you mean?
Just seeing how they feel, some of them change the medication, and you just want to have that communication with your guys to make sure they're okay on that medication.
Right, right. So as a team, you know, we have to have an awareness of our team because, you know, you care about your team members, but what they do could affect you too, right? So you just want to make sure that everybody's on their A game when they come to work, all right? And not, through whatever reason, not all there. So another zero tolerance. This should be pretty familiar to you because apparently this gets routed around and you guys have all signed off on the recent violence in the workplace requirements.
Right? Everyone?
Right?
Who signed off on all of this? Everybody should raise their hands. Even if you didn't, just because George is here, raise your hands.
Did you at least sign off? Because I saw a ton of signatures on a page slapped on top of this requirement. The Highways Division Safety Procedure, Chapter 1.4, got circulated pretty recently. I forget the exact date, but it was like the most recent thing that we found.
So I'm kind of serious about this. Everybody knows where this is. Everybody knows. If not, make sure you talk to your REs so you do know, because every year you're supposed to be looking at this. Every year, because that's the part of complacency. So make sure you're reminding yourself when you're looking at the requirements and you're actually, I think according to your Oahu District procedures, correct me if I'm wrong, signing off every year.
So I hear a little bit of giggling, and I heard somebody say, "What? Stink eye?" But this is what leads up, right, to the violence. And so look at some of these recommended personnel actions, all right? If you're bringing a deadly weapon to the work site, and this is where it's a little controversial because there's a knife up there. How many of you guys bring knives to work? Or you might have knives at work already. So they're tools to you, right, but they're knives. So this is something we're going to have to kind of talk about. But the recommended action is dismissal on the first offense. Okay, that's your policy. So be aware that any of these deadly weapons in the workplace are not allowed. How is it a part of your job?
Your knife?
Yeah, how is your knife a part of your job? Cut down bushes.
The operative word is unauthorized deadly weapon. Okay? Okay, so as long as it's authorized, as long as it's part of your job, and you're not threatening Marvin with it, and using it appropriately, then it's okay. But, and this is from the division safety procedure. You guys have an Oahu safety procedure, so, and I know LAC is going through a revamp of the overall safety procedure.
I just want to let you know, we did terminate someone for just bringing a bullet to work. Not the gun, just brought the bullet and we terminated it.
Okay, so this is serious
So
stuff.
this is serious stuff. So going through that list though, take a look. Threatening with any instrument. So if you just pick up a chair or something and lift it up at somebody, you're doing this violent act. Okay? So it doesn't have to be a specific weapon. It's using whatever as a threatening kind of weapon to do physical harm. So that's not allowed. We're not going to tolerate that kind of violent activity in our job sites. Instigating property damage also, right? So maybe you're not threatening a person, but you like bang up some wall or something in your office because you're so frustrated. No. Okay, verbal. Okay, so this is the one that everyone's kind of like giggling about. The stink eye thing. Verbal or physical threats. It's still, right? The first offense, suspension. So, you know, I know everybody's kind of like, are you serious? Are we really going to do this? This is what's in your policy manual. And they're shaking their heads up and down.
Yeah, you've done that. Verbal threats, physical threats. We've already dismissed people. depends on the type of verbal threat, but guys just arguing got disciplined as well. So you don't hear about it because we're not supposed to talk about the specifics and everything, but I've done it quite a bit. So it's serious, yeah.
So it's kind of like the Humane Society. You don't know because they take you off to some room and you don't see that dog again anymore. Got your attention, no? It's not like that, George said. George said it's not like that in his office. I'm dismissed now. I was threatening you, yeah? Okay, so then again, harassment, intimidation. So this was written before that whole Me Too stuff that came out in the last few years. Anybody know about that? Yeah. Me Too is about sexual harassment, right? So all these people said Me Too because it's happened to them. So sexual harassment falls into violence in the workplace as well. Just know that. Okay? All right. Any questions?
Does it apply to contractors?
Excellent question.
It does.
So basically, like.
And yesterday, we talked in our project management, that 108.04, right? Getting rid of people that are not performing in an orderly manner, disrespectful and all that. If they are doing this kind of thing, that's grounds for removal. So we had a few questions, I think, on this. What activities may lead to immediate dismissal? Zero tolerance within an HDOT workplace. So the correct answers were A, C, and E. So the ones that were not immediate dismissal were the smoking or not wearing PPE on a project site. I mean, you need to be wearing that PPE, but it's not cause for immediate dismissal.
Even when the contractor refuses
When the contractor refuses what?
to wear them.
To themselves wear PPE?
To us. Once the contractor refuses to wear the proper PPE.
If the contractor refuses proper PPE on their own site, we'll talk about that some more too.
So right now we're focused on DOT, and then we're going to be talking about contractors.
Yeah, so this
Because
applies
that's
to
your
us.
oversight responsibility.
So through the assessments, we heard that people felt uncertain, unsure of all the requirements that needed to be enforced and what they needed to also be following. So we are recommending that you also do this OSHA 30-hour training. And so through the course of the year, I think you're going to be in a program where this training is provided to you. And there's two types of OSHA training. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard about the 10-hour and the 30-hour. And the 30-hour is for people who are managing others in a safety kind of manner. So the 10-hour are for people that are performing work, actually doing the work. And all of you are in this managing mode because you're all overseeing others, right? That all your contractors, you're overseeing them. So you need to know how to do this 30-hour version versus the 10-hour.
So on the neighbor islands, through Highway C, they are doing the OSHA 30. How is Ruth? I know you guys get training through Ruth and have a different contract. Art and George, are you guys looking at the OSHA 30? Because that's what the other districts are doing, or something to consider.
I know Ruth is able to teach it. What she had said and what the neighbor islands are doing is over a 6-month period, they're going to be teaching the 30-hour class. So it's broken up into smaller chunks, and after the 6 months, then the certificate is achieved.
I think if anyone's interested, you can actually take it yourself individually online. Like you can actually buy it, and it's for a 6-month period. You can take it yourself.
Yeah, so what Nainoa is saying is that it could be taken online, but I think there's a cost involved, right? It's not free. Yeah, so we are looking at ways to get you guys into classes. And then through the course of the assessments, we also heard a lot about equipment and vehicles. And so this is where if your vehicle is not functioning properly, what are you doing? Turning it in for service? What was that? What was that?
What? Running
Leave?
it anyway?
Running
What did
it.
the slide say before?
Not by choice, not by choice.
Okay, so then
Not
remember,
by choice. So
remember that you're not supposed to put yourself in harm's way, right? In a dangerous environment.
There's a shortage of vehicles, so we have to prioritize.
So you gotta catch bugs. But, so the shortage of vehicles is something that I guess needs to be discussed further, yeah? Within the district and figuring out a way, because apparently there's a lot of this and people do feel concerned with having to drive the vehicles that, so we need everyone to make sure you report the condition of that vehicle, make sure it's known, and supervisors are gonna need to act to show that they're not functioning or have safety hazards. Okay, so that's what you're required to do, okay? So the lane closures via maintenance. Are you folks all aware of that capability that maintenance has for you? Those immediate lane closures that you may need to go out alongside the roadways? Because this came up in the assessment that people were kind of shortchanging things to get things done, you know, trying to be as proactive as possible to do what needed to be done, but unfortunately, in something of an unsafe manner. And so, Art, do you want to talk to that a little?
I brought it up in RE meetings, so all the RE should know that if they need a lane closure outside their contract, especially for the surveyors, they can coordinate with maintenance. I think their meetings every Tuesday.
We do that.
Okay, good. So that was an immediate concern, and of course, we didn't wait to raise that issue because we did our assessments, June, July timeframe, and here it is December already, so that's why Art's already made that very clear to at least all the REs that this is the procedure, okay? So just for you all to be aware as well that that is what's required. So it's not just for the surveyors, even everyone else, if you have to go check out a job site and the contractor's not there to have that lane closure set up, that's what you need to be doing, is working through the maintenance.
And again, the surveys were statewide, so it is not just one district that expressed concerns. The other thing, when we're talking about all of this, I know it becomes uncomfortable to either report a coworker of suspicion or have to talk about a supervisor that's not addressing a situation or whatever it is. So realize there are also anti-retaliation measures that the state and federal government have to follow. So anything that you report would be anonymous, and you should be protected under that. So please, again, because this was something that came out of the assessment, and again, this was a statewide assessment, so I'm not just talking to Oahu, but if something happened and your supervisor you don't feel is addressing, you have to go above them. Of course, understand what you said to your supervisor, document what you said to your supervisor. So if it's the project engineer or the RE or Art, make sure you go up that chain of command, because not doing it is not worth somebody's life. And if, just like George said, if there's one thing that you knew that was happening that led to something, that's something you would have to live with for the rest of your life. So take the appropriate measures, document what you've done, but if it's concerning to you, do not let it just sit. Make sure that you elevate it.
So again, this is also from HAR 110, and we're addressing this to the contractors because they're employers in the state of Hawaii, right? But again, DOT is an employer in the state of Hawaii. So this is where it applies to you and to the contractor. Here we're saying that this section applies to all employers. Any employee having knowledge of the existence of any unsafe device, practice, operation, safeguard equipment, or condition shall promptly report to the supervisor or person in charge. So this is where you guys mentioned, right? What would we do? We would talk to our supervisor. And that's the appropriate thing to do. And it's what you're legally bound to do also. And then the second or the third red underline now addresses the supervisor. It says, thus a supervisor or person in charge to whose attention the existence of this unsafe stuff is reported to must take immediate steps to correct the unsafe. Shall take immediate steps to correct the unsafe condition or practice. So this is where your supervisor now is bound legally also to do something.
So if it's an unsafe vehicle, does that mean that you get a new vehicle? No. That might not be how they address it, right? It may be, okay, you gotta go to the motor pool or whatever your process is, but they will address it. So you should not drive the unsafe vehicle. Maybe there's another way to address it, but that's where the chain of command will address it. It may not be to get you a new vehicle. Just keep that in mind.
So then likewise, this applies to the contractors, right? And while we're on their job sites, we're the employees having knowledge of any unsafe condition. Okay, so this is where you play in. And the person in charge on the job site is who? Who's in charge of safety on the job site?
Daniel says he's in charge of it.
Daniel's in charge. Anybody else?
I had safety officer.
Safety officer. Which safety officer? The contractors?
Contractors.
Okay, so the
Contractor
contractor safety
So
officer.
we have the state is in charge, contractor, superintendent, I heard over here. Foreman right here.
The foreman is the
And
contractor.
everybody, make it rain over here, make it rain, everybody.
All right, so you guys get the idea. But as far as who to report to,
I'm going this way.
who do you think is the person that really needs to be informed on a contract site? The safety officer? Superintendent? Foreman? Okay, so this is what we need to clear up, all right? And when we go through our exercise, we're gonna address who it is that is gonna need to know. So keep this question in your mind. I'm not just gonna give you an answer right now, so that you're like just anticipating and waiting for this exercise, all right? But employees can be safety leaders too. So this idea of we're all in charge, yes you are, because you need to at least notify. That's your charge, right? Notifying people when there are these hazards. So this was one of the questions. What is the minimum requirement for HDOT employees if you observe a safety issue on a project site? Do you stop work, report, or do nothing because you're not in charge of safety? B, report, right? We just see this right here. That's why I put it right next to this slide. Is you got to do that at least as a minimum report.
So during the assessments, it was concerning, and that's why we wanted to have this session, because people were ready to stop work all the way to not say anything. So they see something unsafe, it's not my job, it's a contractor's job, I say nothing. All the way to, I'm going to stop work if I see anything. So, of course, if it is a pending unsafe condition, we never want anything to happen. So there's discretion that goes in all of this. But as a minimum, it's reporting. So that hard hat that's not happening, it's reporting to the person in charge. So as we go through the exercise, we'll figure out who those people in charge are. But at a minimum, it's reporting. And it may be the rebar covers, or it may be something that is impeding pedestrian traffic in the community. It may be something small, it may be something big. So there's a wide range, but at a minimum, we have to report it.
So remember yesterday in the morning we talked about all the, we talked about all the logs. I'm getting all my classes mixed up. So one of the logs that we had was what? That we can use in this scenario where the hard hat repeatedly doesn't get used. The deficiency log. Remember we talked about how that deficiency log does not need to be only about improperly constructed quality issues, but it's also anything unperformed properly. So repeated, or even the first offense, depending on how severe it is, you may want to log on this deficiency log and keep track. Because again, you have that power of that list, right? The infraction or the non-performance, the date it occurred, and how many times. Pretty soon, you get 5 of those in a row for a whole week. I think that guy should go home. He doesn't want to work. And you have that data, and you're going over this report with your contractor every week, so it can't be ignored. So that's that power of that list on all these logs. And you just sort and sift through what you need to bring to the top in order to put emphasis on it. So you may be using some kind of code saying these are all safety deficiencies, right? And be able to sort for that. All right, so in our contracts, why do we need to enforce safety? So in your special provisions, normally you have this section 102.16 if your contract is over 100,000. So do you guys have stuff under 100,000? Anybody? DAX guys? Yours do? So if we had one of their kind of contracts, this may not apply, but I will show you how the law addresses those smaller contracts. But in general, ours are in this realm, so we always have this provision, section 102.16, which requires that any contractor who's signing a contract with us, right, is going to certify that they will have a written safety and health plan for your project. Okay, and it will be available and implemented by the notice to proceed date for this project. So not only does it exist in a written form, but they promise to implement. So do you understand what implementing is? What that means? That means they're using it, so it's in force. And so if in their plan, Lee, if they say they're going to wear PPE and they're not, then now they're in violation of their own plan. So we'll get more into that, but just know that they have made this certification up front that they will have a plan and they will implement it per this clause. By signing that contract, they've agreed to this. Okay? This is in your contracts. And you have safety in other places. Do these look familiar? So through the assessments, we heard a lot about the one at the bottom. You guys are doing a great job with enforcing section 645, which is the work zone traffic control. I heard a lot of inspectors, it's the first thing they do on the job site, go past all the work site setup of traffic control and make sure it's per whatever plan was in place, or if there's adjustments that look like they may be needed because of, you know, turning radiuses approaching, they make adjustments. But you guys are very vigilant on enforcing 645 from what you told us. Now, all these other parts are in your standard spec. So they're not in specials typically, they're in the standard. Just kind of keep this one in mind right here. See this 107.01 insurance requirements? Why does that apply to safety? Why is that a safety spec? Oh, what was that in the back?
Medical costs.
So what is insurance? Liability. Yeah?
Liability.
Liability.
So do insurance like to insure people that are high risk? Do insurance companies like to insure people that are not following their safety plan? Do insurance companies like to insure people that are letting people run around without hard hats when it's required? No. It becomes a liability. It becomes a risk for them. So it's important. Because through the districts, the comment came up, actually from DAX as well as DOT, they're not even wearing hard hats. Are we really doing this? The answer is yes. And they should be. And according to the law, they're supposed to have all this in place. According to your contract, they're supposed to have it in place.
So take a look at those insurance certificates that you get and look what they're being insured for. Okay? Liability, there's the vehicle stuff on there, right? So this all goes to safety, and that's why maybe I should have highlighted this more, but that's one where it's not quite obvious. And these other ones, you know, like of course the 10711 safety accident prevention, that's obvious because it has the word accident in there. But take a look at some of these other areas because they all relate to safety, either for the public, right, or us, or just in general making sure that things are done safely on the job site. Okay? So there are requirements in all of these sections. Hazardous materials, that's pretty obvious too, right? Yes? Okay, so just recognize that all of these things, protection of persons and property, are part of safety requirements. Okay, so this is that question number 1. What standard specs or special provision covers safety requirements? Circle the best answer or answers. What's the answer?
107.
E, all of the above. So now we've shown you how all of those numbers apply to safety. Okay? 102 was that first one that we showed you right here. Section 102.116 is what binds the contractor to perform this safety plan and implement, right? You get a written plan, plus he has to implement. Question?
So, like I know this is kind of a thing with some contractors, because they used to annoy me when I was a general, but for the safety plan, it has to be site-specific, yeah?
Yes.
Not general.
Right, so the safety plan does need to be site-specific, and we will go through that in the exercise I have for you. All right? Again, just re-emphasizing the 12-110 applies for construction. And so these are all the chapters that are included in that 110 area. And the safety plan and the requirements for a safety plan or program are in chapter 2, section 2 of this 110. Okay? So we're going to kind of quickly go through that. But before I do that, there is, so this is the state HIOSH web page, right? And it does talk about, you know, all this other stuff about the citations they do, but when I call them, they have what's called a consultation. So if you have contractors that are struggling with their safety plans, maybe they're smaller, they don't understand all this written stuff in our contracts, they can go to the state, sign up for this consultation, and work with the state. And what that buys them by cooperating and being serious about safety is that they qualify for a 1-year exemption from any routine OSHA inspection. Now, if they have an accident, OSHA will still come out, okay? But they will at least, you know, be kind of schooled and taught. So if they're under this program, they get a little more TLC from the state in coming into compliance. And so our big contractors, unfortunately, are expected to know better. And so they get put on the bottom of the list, and the smaller businesses get put at the top of the list. Okay? And they're the ones that typically do need more help, and that's why HIOSH does this. They put them at the top, and they give them this special. So in your handout, you'll see a sample template that HIOSH uses to work with these contractors. It looks like this. So the big bulk of handouts you got has these samples. Okay? So this sample came directly from HIOSH, and this is what they sit down and work through with contractors to get them to fill it out and put their input in. So all the highlighted areas are what the company has to now put in, but it gives them a framework for what they can do to create their plans. And so we're giving this sample to you all so that you know what should be in a plan but we're not recommending you give them out to contractors.
Why?
Liability.
Who said liability?
I heard the word right here.
Okay, two liabilities.
So liability.
That's
All right.
right.
Whose plan is it supposed to be? The contractors. All right, good. I don't know who to give tickets to on that because so many people said it.
Make your
Yeah.
friends everywhere.
But
So-
you're absolutely right.
But on the wiki site, there is a link to HIOSH. So you can refer them to HIOSH. They can go to HIOSH and get the sample plan themselves.
So when HIOSH works with them, they're very careful to make sure that this becomes a plan that they embrace, that they own. They don't just say, here, follow this plan similarly. So with that in mind, we're giving this to you just for your reference and your understanding so that when you see a plan, you'll know what should be in it. But another thing that happens, I guess, with these guys that do participate is they become a part of this SHARP, Safety and Health Achievement Recognition Program, and they get their logos on the website, and, they're like good guys, right? And I don't know what effect it has on that insurance that they pay, but it can't hurt. So just know that this is a resource for your contractors if they just seem clueless and have no idea what they can do about their safety plans. Okay? And these guys are staffing up. When I talked to them, I think a couple months ago, they had a bunch of people newly recruited that are being trained this month. So by January, they promised me that all the contractors we start sending to them will get addressed. So we'll see. But they are staffing up to be able to help these contractors. So going back to the HAR 110-2, I mentioned that this is the chapter that tells you everything that's required. And you have a handout that looks just like the slide. Okay, and it's a little checklist. What we did was we read through the entire chapter and we pulled out all the minimum requirements that are required. And in checking with the safety folks and with HIOSH, this list matches up pretty well with that sample that you have. Yeah, and Ruth Amancio, who's also involved with you all for now several years, right? She's your safety expert. She's kind of blessed off on this list as well, as far as what we're emphasizing. This was one of the questions too that I really wanted to emphasize because I don't know why people keep getting this one wrong. You can get it wrong on the pre, but you better not get it wrong on the post, okay? When the safety plan is received from the contractor, HDOT will acknowledge receipt without comment as this is the contractor's safety plan, and therefore the contractor's means and methods. Yes, no, or I don't know. No.
Ooh, wait, who said yes?
Who said yes?
Brandon.
Take away the ticket. Okay, but you see tickets over here, so no.
No.
We don't just acknowledge receipt. We're going to look at these plans, okay? And we're going to make sure what, Nainoa?
It's site specific.
Site specific. Yes.
Yay.
Yeah, oh, he gets more tickets. Okay, I owe you. So we're going to make these things site specific and real, just like what we said yesterday about schedules. When we talked about schedules, we said, let's make these things real and pertinent to the job, something we understand. Similarly, safety and health plans, programs, need to be relevant to the project at hand, okay? So some company safety plan, is that good enough? No, because why?
Daniel.
Why is it not good enough? Just say no. No, because it's not site specific. It's just their generic company plan, right? So how do we know they've covered everything on our site? Our site may have unique things, right, that need to be addressed, and a company plan may not be doing it. So we need to check it, all right? And so this is the list again, and I said it was what?
The maximum requirement?
The minimum. Okay,
Can
so
we do more?
can they do more?
Yes. Can we do less?
No! So this is the minimum, keep that in mind, right? This one pager is the minimum of what you should see in a safety and health program. So sometimes you may see stuff from the contractor that says accident prevention plans because they might be reusing something from the Corps. You need to check it to make sure it's meeting the state requirement for minimums. Okay? The title isn't necessarily a requirement.